So I was at a conference recently, and one of my friends and colleagues came up to me and she was talking about how she was growing her team. She was going to be expanding and she was looking at hiring family members into the business. Now, when I say family members, I can refer to spouses, siblings, parents, children, all of the things. And in this case, it was going to be an in-law, so like a sibling in-law. And she was asking me, Shannon, what do you think about hiring family into your business? And it was an interesting question because I'm conflicted. And I wanted to actually expand on it on an episode because I think that a lot of folks are struggling with hiring, and maybe with the increased wage costs, we're like, hey, maybe if I hire my family, they'll chip in, they'll help. I mean, they love me, they want me to succeed, and I don't have to deal with hiring a stranger, which is very true. There's a lot of pros, but there's also a lot of cons to it. And I don't have a universal opinion. I think that every case is different, but I wanted to actually unpack for you what are the considerations and what are the things to keep in mind when you're hiring family. Like, you may be looking through the rose-colored glasses of, no, it's great, it's awesome. Why would I not want to hire my brother or my sister or my spouse into my business? So not only am I going to give you the reasons why it could get rocky, which I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but that I want to give you a heads up on that so that you can build the processes around that to prevent it from happening. But I also want to talk about the pros because I think that people underappreciate the actual advantages of doing this from both a tax standpoint and others. So let's dive into the pros. So number one, if you're hiring family, you have this inherent sense of loyalty. So they're excited for you, they're rooting for you, they want you to succeed, and they will probably be more likely to be flexible with you and be patient with you. So with your communication. So you're going to probably, hopefully, I should say hopefully, I hope everyone out there has this situation. Like if I hire Jason into the business, that we have a dynamic already of communication. I already know how he communicates well. I know, what his strengths are. You have this inherent head start in the relationship. So you already know enough about them to know maybe what their strengths are, maybe what their background is, and they love you, they want to work with you. So it kind of goes over a lot of the awkwardness of hiring a quote unquote stranger or having to go through the interview process. It does cut the line a little bit and get you help a lot faster. So that's one big thing. They're also more likely to be more flexible, not just in the way they work or how they work or when they work, but flexible with you, like I said, patience and understanding. And they're likely to flex to what you need. Now, that may not be the case all the time, but they will probably be relatively flexible. Think about this. If you asked for a favor over the weekend from your spouse or from your sister or brother, they would be more likely probably to say yes to you than if you asked your staff to do that. And you may be more comfortable asking them to do that. You may be more comfortable with them to communicate openly and to be transparent and honest. So that might be another point as well. And they're rooting for you. Like I said, they're rooting for you. So aside from having kind of a built-in cheerleader on your side, that is really, really key. Now, let's talk about the actual tax benefit for a second here, because this gets a little creative. So if you're hiring somebody into your business, you're hiring a family member. Let's use spouse as an example. So if I'll use Jason as my example. If I hire Jason into my business, he's an employee and he's doing, let's say he's my technology and IT guy, which is what we're actually talking about doing. He does systems really well. He does tech really well. He set up my podcast for me. He's really savvy at all that stuff. So let's say he's my CTO, my chief technology officer. So I make him that. So then I'm going to conferences, I'm going on trips, I'm going to meet business colleagues, and I say, I want him to come with me. Well, if he were not an employee or were not in the business on paper, then his stuff wouldn't be business deductible. He would be paying his way personally, or I would be paying his way personally, and we would not get a tax deduction for his travel. But because he would be an employee, now I can argue I'm bringing my employee to this conference. I'm bringing my chief technology officer to this AI summit. Obviously, that makes total sense. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Even if it wasn't my husband, I would bring my CTO to that summit. So you have to look at business cases, but overall, there's a lot more flexibility in how you can actually deduct your spouse's expenses, whether it be travel, maybe it could be a couple of meals together to discuss business or meetings. You could be looking at, when you take business trips and stay for business purposes, you can add a few more deductions to the list and so on. So it's really key to understand how this could impact you. Now, is there a ton of benefit to that? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on how much you plan on utilizing this, but it's something to consider. And even if it's not your spouse, it could be, let's say it's your brother or your sister. If it's a sibling and you're paying them to be in the business, again, you get some type of business deduction for taking them if you pay their way. But also, this just expands a lot of the family wealth. This expands a lot of family wealth by keeping cash flow in the family, but being able to move taxability. So perhaps they are in a lower tax bracket than you are, and now you're paying more income to them, and that might be favorable to you and more favorable overall from who's paying taxes to be able to transfer that. So if you have a sister doesn't make as much money as you do, and you're transferring money to them to be able to pay them for their work that they're doing, then chances are they'll pay less in taxes than you would have if you kept that money in your profit. So just keep that in mind that there could be some like income shifting there. Now, I should disclaim this and say there's always got to be a business purpose and a clear reason why you're hiring this person and a reasonable salary to go along with it. This is not something where you can just like dance around and do, whatever amount of money you want and call it whatever you want. There should be legitimate work done, tracked, all of that stuff. So when you hire people, you got to make sure you're doing that. The other thing you can do is you can hire your family. Let's say I'm hiring Jason, but instead of hiring him as an employee, I hire him as a contractor and through his other company. And if I hire his other company, which is a consulting company, I can hire him as a consultant to help me. And what that means is I can hire him. I give him money. So he's claiming income, and we have a joint return, by the way. So I have an expense. He has income when I hire him. And then he gets that income. But here's the kicker. He can then take deductions for his home office, his travel, whatever it takes, the equipment it takes for him to do the work. So if he buys a new laptop for his consulting business to work with me, then that's deductible to him, and it can offset the income that he makes from me paying him. So you can do these things where like you're creating a separate business for the spouse to work on other clients and you. The key is though that it has to be legit. It has to be a legit, let's say, consulting business that he's actually seeking clients and so on. So you have to just be mindful of different tax rules around this, but there's tons of advantages to having family in the business because you can keep kind of the cash flow in the family. You're managing the cash flow a bit better. It also means that you might have some flexibility in terms of, how and when you pay somebody. So if you're in a cash flow crunch, but like your main employee is your brother, then you can be like, hey man, I'm really sorry. Can I pay you? Can we have like an IOU situation? Can I pay you the next week, the next month? As long as that's not their main gig and like they're relying on you for a mortgage or something, they're probably more likely to be flexible with you than, say, an average person who you hire. So that being said, there are some advantages to family for sure, but I want to also highlight ways that this could go sideways and get ahead of it. So if you're planning on hiring your family, keep this in mind. You may have not be able to draw boundaries very well. This is a key thing. You may have a struggle with boundaries in the form of when you're talking about business. And this is actually a big thing, is if you are working together all the time, then you may be losing a little bit of the appeal of, hey, how was your day? What were you up to today? What did you accomplish today? What's one of your wins today? Like if you're going for a walk or having dinner at the end of the day and you're talking to your spouse, you want to be able to catch them up on stuff. You don't want to both be like, well, we were both in all the same meetings today. So there's that. But you want to have a actual conversation with them and share new information and keep things lively. So I would say if you are close to and living with this person, you want to be intentional about creating either separate office spaces, separate functions, separate duties, so that you're not together all the time. I think there's something to be said about maintaining some type of separation so that you have news to share and that you can pour into each other and be learning separately and then bringing that together. I think that's really special. And I think that also money can complicate things with family. So if it's not, let's say it's not a spouse and you're not keeping it in the same household, but you're hiring your brother, your sister, your cousin, whatever it may be, it can get a little bit dicey. So if you already don't have a really solid relationship and a communication channel with that person in your family, then this can add more stress to the situation. Because if you're adding transactions into an already tumultuous relationship, it's not going to go well. Probably not going to go well. And you have to be mindful of, okay, well, if like one person owes the other person something all the time and there isn't really a clear communication channel, or just like there's always a gap somewhere, then this may not be a good idea to hire them. And you may be sympathetic to the fact that, hey, like my cousin needs work. He's out on his luck. He was laid off. He needs a job to do. I would say if you are feeling compelled to hire someone in your family because, hey, it's my family, it's my blood, like I'm not going to not hire them. I would be really intentional about the degree of reliance you're putting on them. And if you can afford to, I would give them a job that is not going to impact your success or failure drastically. So if they're not doing their job or something happens with them, that it's not going to ripple into the rest of your organization. I would also not put them in a position where they could be, and I'm not saying this is the case, but you want to protect yourself against them being that what's the analogy or the metaphor? The rotten piece of fruit that infects the rest of the bowl. You know, like how you have one piece of fruit that will get moldy and then it will infect the rest. You don't want them to be a bad example, especially if you have a habit of tolerating and not communicating with, especially family, or confronting them, even though they have some type of bad behavior. Maybe they're not, they're not being respectful in the workplace or something, but oh, it's my family. It's like, yeah, I know, but it could be creating a ripple effect of that in the rest of the organization. So you have to be really mindful of that. It's like, are you tolerating them differently than the rest of your workers? Do you have a separate standard for them? You want to try to avoid that at all costs. So what I'm trying to say is when you look at hiring family, how are they going to integrate into your culture? And how are you going to hold them accountable to maintaining that culture consistently across the board? And finally, you may be tempted to not give honest feedback. So like I said, holding them to the same standard, you may be tempted to, to go to them and say, hey, like, great job, nod to them, say yes, do all the things, and not want to give them negative feedback because of the relationship that you have. You're afraid it could impact the relationship. It's true. So you just want to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of. You're not taking advantage of that person, but also that you're being super fair about everything. And I think that having that open and honest dialogue up front is key. We've talked about this before in episodes, but I think it's crucial to sit down. If you're going to hire, frankly, anyone, I'll be honest, I've done this with any type of hire I have where I'll be completely transparent and treat it as a partnership and go, hey, like, what are the different ways that we could either screw each other over or piss each other off? And let's just go through like the things that piss us off or the things that make us feel successful. And let's just talk about that so we can understand how we work. And I think you have to be willing to have that conversation even with family. And yes, you know them, probably know them very well, but having that conversation in the context of a business and work arrangement is key because you'll want to create an environment that fosters your success and their success as much as you possibly can. We're not rooting against them, and we're definitely not assuming that they're going to be damaging to us, our brand, our culture, our company, but you want to avoid that happening because even with the best intentions, it's so common that a family member just doesn't understand, how to contribute to the business effectively, or there's a misunderstanding of expectations or communication, and it can go south really fast. So before you enter into any type of arrangement with family in your business, just know the boundaries you want to draw. Just know that what your tendencies are, what their tendencies are, and get ahead of that. If you're more of a people pleaser and non-confrontational, especially with family, put that on the table and say, hey, I have a really tough time with conflict. So like if there's ever a rift between us, I don't want to confront it. I won't want to confront it. So how is a way that I can make it known that there's something wrong without feeling uncomfortable doing that? I forget who it was. Now I can't remember. I cannot remember who it was. Forgive me. It was a couple that was telling this story that they had this, I guess, the elephant in the room, literally. They had an elephant they would put on the table so the other person would put it on the table if there was something they really wanted to talk about. So they wouldn't have to say, I want to talk about something. They would put that, and it sounds non-confrontational, but it actually was really helpful because they would put the elephant on the table as if to indicate, hey, tonight when like all things are clear and we're chilling and whatever, and we're in a good place, I want to just talk about something with you that I need to address. And I think that was a really cool perspective to have some type of process to say, hey, I have to talk to you about something, and to open that line of communication up. I think that's key with family. And that's really the theme of the whole episode is having that line of communication to be able to hire them effectively, to be successful together is key. So find a way to implement that in your business if you are going to hire family, but also consider the different types of impact that it could have and what to do if you encounter it. Always have a plan, always have a way to handle it, and always be open and honest with the people you hire about what your expectations are, and you'll both be successful.